Hi everyone, this is Sarah with the website Doula, and I'm going to walk you through how to select a font using Google Fonts. So every font you find on here is free, and there are a variety of really fun and creative ways to search through them and also test them out. So first, when you land on the site, you're just going to see a variety of options. And they've got this kind of standard sample text. Now, I personally find it really helpful to type in a business name or a typical sentence that I might be writing on a website so that I can see what the words I'm most likely to be using would look like. So, for example, if your business is called Cherish Chiropractic, you'll notice that some fonts look better than others with those words. And sometimes you can love a font, but there might be just one letter that's just kind of funky and doesn't look good. So you do want to make sure that you test this out. You can test it out with all caps and see how that works. Whoa, there we go. And you'll notice that, again, some of them look better than others. You can test the font size to see how it looks larger or smaller. You can test it all in lowercase, right? So you can play around with this as much as you want, or even try your name. With a whole sentence and see how it looks. Update preview text. There we go. It takes a moment to fill in. So from here, how do I actually choose? There's so many fonts. Look at this. There's 1,048 font families. Well, there are specific characteristics to fonts that help you winnow them down. So for example, this font here is what we call a sans serif font. And what that means is that the edges of the letters are all straight. Whereas this font is both a handwriting font, right? You can see that it looks a bit more handwritten, but also see how the edges of the letters have little squiggles on them. The same is true for this font, right? Those are called serif fonts. Now, when it comes to print, typically serif fonts are actually easier to read, but on websites it's the opposite. So on websites, best practice is considered to usually choose a sans serif font for your main body text. So the bulk of your content would be in a sans serif, such as Railway or Nunito or Robotomano or Noto Sans or Lato, Source Sans Pro. Those are all pretty common ones. Whereas your headers, you can use a somewhat funkier header like Oswald, or you can choose to use a serif font such as Playfair Display or Merriweather. And the combination of the two can be quite effective. So that's your kind of first discerning design characteristic is, do you feel more drawn to serif fonts with the squiggles or sans serif fonts with the straight lines? And you might find yourself looking at some sample websites and noticing the kinds of fonts that you respond to best. And then you'll notice that each font actually has multiple styles. So Open Sans is a good example. So let's open that up. Open Sans is a pretty common font style. And you'll notice that the light version feels quite different than the semi-bold and the italic or the extra bold. And so when you're selecting the variation, you want to be looking at not just the font, but the weight and the styling of it that you feel most drawn to. Also within here, we can search by categories. And so let's say I only want to look at serif fonts. Suddenly, I've got a very different playing field right here. These are all serif fonts. Now, if I want to look at fonts that are thicker, I could bring that up. If I want to look at fonts that are thinner, I can bring it down. See the difference? I can look at fonts with a slant that are serif. I could look at fonts in different languages. I can look at the width of the font. And so letters that are, well, it doesn't have any. Letters that are wider versus thinner in their kind of breadth and space they take up. And so that's one really simple way that you can start to, sort through these and figure out what's going to work best for you. And if you scroll down on any given font, you'll see that there's suggestions. And so you can see that Cardo, which is this one, is often combined with Open Sans, or with Montserrat, or with Lato. So you can see what those combinations look like, which is super helpful. Let's go back. We can look at sans serif, right? These are the straight ones. I also like to look at the handwriting ones. Now the handwriting ones are a bit tricky because most of them are either overused or don't have great legibility or feel kind of childlike, or kind of are a little bit older fashioned. The handwriting fonts on Google Fonts are not great. Some of my favorites are Zayada and Dawning of the New Day. That's another one. Bad Script is okay. Dancing Script is a popular one to use, but I think it's overused, and you'd be better off looking at a custom font. So for custom fonts, I do recommend that you go to Creative Market. And Creative Market has a wealth of amazing handwriting fonts. So you can just search by handwriting fonts. And wow, I mean, there's just some gorgeous ones in here. And again, they vary in legibility, so do make sure that you open them up. Now this one's a good example because this one actually doesn't have a web font. So earlier in the blog post, I was talking about the importance of having web-friendly fonts. This one is not going to work for you. So you want to make sure that it has a web font available. Let's try Barley. Nope. Come on. Modern Line. There we go. Web font. Okay. And then you just have to select typically how many page views. Most of you will probably be at 10K. And with these fonts, again, you can do preview text. So you could try your business name and test it out in 24 point or 36 point, 48 point. And many of these fonts might also come with other design elements as well. And you can see examples of them by clicking through the elements here. So those are web fonts. And to install a web font, you really will need me or another web designer to help you do that. That's not something I would recommend you do on your own. But they're super affordable, right? $8 to $20, and you've got a gorgeous custom handwritten font to use on your website. So with any given font, I do strongly encourage you to pay close attention to legibility and design feel, right? These have very different feels. Like this one, not very legible. I would certainly have trouble with this, especially on a mobile device. Railway is a very common one used, and it has some really nice variation in the weights. The feel changes. The W is a little bit funky. You may or may not like how that looks. But another creative way that you can go about this is to go to Pinterest and actually just search Google font combinations. And so here we have different recommended combinations of Google fonts. And you can open any one of these pins up and see what different fonts look like together. You could even search something like modern Google font combinations, or playful, or best handwriting fonts on Google Fonts, anything like that, and you'll find lots of great suggestions and guidance. All right, that should be enough to get you started. Now, if you are working with me as your web designer, I will absolutely help you select your fonts. Some clients have really clear ideas around the kinds of fonts that they want. Others just kind of say, you know what, Sarah, I trust you. You're my website doula. Please pick fonts for me, and then we can fine tune during our design build if they aren't quite right. So I recognize that fonts are a really important part of your wellness website design. And I encourage you to explore and play, but don't let yourself get overwhelmed. If you reach the place where it's just too much, reach out for help and get some professional guidance, because the right font choices really can shape how a website feels to site visitors and make the difference in terms of conversion. All right, thanks for watching.